Welcome to another Allar tutorial. Now, in the past, I've had two tutorials on my site, or I guess one long one, called Beginning Your Game, Part 1 and Part 2. And with that code, I went into how to make your own game class that's based off UT game, and your player controller based off UT. Basically, all the code that we've done so far is based off UT code. And I had it, at the time I made those tutorials, I had in mind that the project I was working on would be based off that code, but then some parts of our project has changed, and now I need to basically base off the higher up classes instead of UT game. I'm basing it off of just game info straight off that class, and instead of UT player controller, we are basing our player controller based off of just the standard player controller class. The reason for this is we wanted to have more of a portfolio piece because the project I'm working on as I'm building these tutorials is a student-run project called The Hunt. And if you look at my desktop right now, you'll see that the wallpaper here is just some of the concept art that we have for The Hunt. And The Hunt is going to be a standalone game based off the Unreal Engine using UDK, and it's a student project. We have about 40 students working on it, give or take a few. Part of the, we're all enrolled at the Art Institute of Orange County, so I figured I'm the only programmer on this team. We have tons of artists and stuff, but I'm the only programmer, and I wanted to push a project that was more more from scratch, I guess you can say. Even though, I mean, I'll still be taking code from UT Game and stuff, but I wanted to basically go from a higher level. That way I have more control over everything, and some of our gameplay elements don't need all that UT Game code, and some of that just gets in the way. Now, that means for the rest of these tutorials, I will be basing it off of game info instead of UT Game, and player controller instead of UT player controller, and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to be trying to get as far away from UT code and be basing it just off the game framework or package or the engine package instead of the UT game and UT game content packages, which is what I think we should all be doing anyway. So this means there's a little bit more extra code that you have to add in some of the base classes we created. Now, here you see in beginning your game part 2, one of the first classes, one of the classes we made of the 3 was the UDK game class, which extends UT game. Now, what we have right here is pretty straightforward. If you follow this tutorial, you'll understand just at least 10 lines of code, really simple 10 lines. But because I'm now basing this off of game info, I have to recreate some of this functionality that we have here in order to have our code still work, but based off the higher up class. Now, I'll be opening up my UT game class right here. Hold on one second. And you'll see that there's a bit more code this time. And also I'm using GReal. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but WOT GReal. So my little interface is different. I'll be linking to a tutorial on how to set up this program. It's really easy now that there's an update for the UDK. Anyways, so what we see here is pretty much all this code here just makes it so that it has the same functionality on map prefixes that a map prefix will load a game class. And that's the only functionality I took from UT game that I've added, because if you look at our UT game class, all this, we have 2 lines controlling map prefixes and 2 lines controlling default pawn class and player controller class. Now these 2 lines here, that's in UT game info. But these 2 here, these were made in UT game. So I had to recreate this functionality because I like this functionality. I'd like to be able to change game modes based on map prefixes. And yeah, I'm pretty sure you would too, but you don't have to. But in order to recreate that functionality, basically I just took the game type prefix from UT game and pasted it in here. And I need to credit to Epic for that. But then I also have an array of default map prefixes, and then I basically copy pasted the UT game set game type class, but then I took out a lot of some of the code that was irrelevant, and basically made it so that it works for this class, but I don't need all the code from UT game. So yeah, I will be posting this code on the written section of this tutorial, or I guess you can say this is not really a tutorial, it's more of an explanation of why are some of the changes that I've done to these series of tutorials. But as you can see, it's pretty much the same. The only new line of code I added in the default properties block is this default inventory, which just adds one of my custom weapons. But you don't have that custom weapon yet, I assume, so you don't have to add that line at all. I'll be taking that line out, actually, in the written version. But yeah, if you should be able to follow this code, and if you look at UT game code and you look at the UT game set game type function, it should make sense. Pretty much all what we're doing is that the set game type function is ran every time the game info class is loaded. It's just an event that is automatically triggered, and it passes in the map name. And I have it so that my front end, it always loads UDK game class, and this here is just default code that strips out the Unreal Editor. The Unreal Editor plugin tags that it's automatically added when you play in the editor. And this here just loops through the array, and if it finds a prefix that is equal to the current map name, it will change to that game class, and if it doesn't, it'll just return the same class it's in, so it won't set a class. I mean, it won't go to a new game type because it's not recognized in the default map property, default map prefixes. And if you add any more map prefixes, you would just add default map prefixes 0 and 1. I also added a new game info class called the hunt game, which derives from this class, actually. And this just has, this is pretty much just some code based off of the UDN tutorial, your first Unreal script project. I'll be posting a link to that too. That was just some code I was just testing and examining how that tutorial worked. But there is one class here that I don't have, I did add, called add default inventory. The UT game class did have this by default, but, well, this is actually called automatically, but it's just a stub in game info, I believe, so I had to re-add it in this class here. And all this does is it adds the default inventory that I have an array in the hunt game. It's just default inventory there. In fact, if I go back to UDK game, this shouldn't even be there because that's not even in this code. That should be in here, which I did comment out because I was doing some testing. So yeah, add default inventory, it basically loops through this array, which you can fill in default properties by just doing the same thing in the other code, like the same thing we did in the UDK game, which is just default inventory 0 equals this class. And when every time a player needs default inventory, this function is ran, passes in the pawn, and this runs through the array, gives that pawn one instance of each default inventory in the array, and that's it. Now this player control login event, all that does is it changes a player's name. That's based off the UDN tutorial found, and that would just makes every player name new player instead of player 256 or 255 or whatever the default was. And post login, that doesn't even need to be there. I was adding some stuff in there, but all that does right now is just calling the super post login, so that doesn't even need to be there. I'll probably take that out in the written version as well. So now also see that, do I have it here? Oh no. Alright, so yeah, those are the changes I made to the Hunt game, because UDK game I'm using as like my generic game class I use for front ends and stuff, while the Hunt game is the main game class I'm gonna be using for the Hunt. Yeah, the Hunt. And I'll be posting a link to our student group's homepage, and you can find a little bit more information about the Hunt there if you're interested. And if you're interested in helping in some way, I'm sure we can work something out if you have some skills that you want to show off or whatever. Anyways, now that we're, no, what else did I add here? Now, I also added some code in HT player controller, because that's now based off UDK player controller instead of UT player controller. And there's a draw HUD function, and all it does is draw a green little crosshair. Not really all that important. And show target info. This code here is taken right out of the UDN first terminal script project. In fact, you don't even have to have anything in here. Like, this can be exactly the same as the HT player controller we made in the last series. Even though it's based off UDK player controller now, it's not adding any functionality at all. It's just a blank stub. So in the written version, none of this will be here. It'll just be this up here. And this HT online subsystem, that's not even going to be there either, because HT online subsystem is a DLL that I'm making that basically interacts with a master server, updates serverless and stuff, and that's way out of the scope of this tutorial. But I'll be making a tutorial on that in the distant future. Very distant. That is pretty complex. So, now with that, what else have I added here that's relevant? HT pawn is now based off UDK pawn. And I had to add a dynamic light environment component to get some of the skeletal mesh stuff working properly. And basically all of this is just the default properties of UT pawn, but put in HT pawn, and I deleted all the properties that were just missing in HT pawn because of the fact that UT pawn introduced a lot of properties that just don't exist here anymore. And I had to make a get eye height function, because I thought this function was in UDK pawn, but it's not. And this function helps for some weapons code later on, but we're not there yet in this tutorial, so I'm going to be ripping that out of the written thing too. And all this here is pretty much, what do we have for, let me look up the UT pawn. Yeah, see right now we have 6 lines of code for HT pawn, list extends UT pawn. All I did here in HT pawn was I basically, as I said before, took the default properties block of UT pawn, pasted it in here, compiled, and removed everything that still is in UDK pawn and HT pawn, but not in UT pawn. That way, there's no warnings or anything. And yeah, so that's what I did there. And I'll be posting this code on the written version, so you can copy paste and you can read through it. It should make sense. And along with this video explanation, the two should tie together. So yeah, this is part 3. This is just an information overview, I guess, of what I've changed in order to fit my project. There's really, in the written version, I'll be giving you only the code that I changed that's relevant to beginning your game, because there's some extra code here, as I said before. But the extra code that I did add, we will be adding some of that later when we go over in part 4, because I have to make a part 4 now to base more stuff off UT instead of, to base stuff off more of the upper level classes instead of the UT code, so that we can start adding custom weapons and things like that. So make your 3 classes that we've already built to look at the written version and copy that code, read through it, should have an understanding of it. It's pretty easy stuff, and it's just basically ripping code off UTK. Even if you don't understand it, it's basically just the same code that's in UT-Pawn and stuff like that, but moved up a level. That way we don't have everything in UT-Pawn, just the 1 or 2 things we absolutely need. Because, as I said, the hunt project that we're working on, we're trying to do more upper level things. So, yeah. And so stay tuned to part 4, and we will create an inventory manager and a base weapon class to do some cool stuff. And yeah, I'll see you then.